You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
This is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I'm really excited. I have Sophia Hembeck here from Scotland, originally from Germany, but going to talk podcast, philosophy, writing. I know you love talking about writing, so just wanted to welcome you to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
It's a great opportunity, and thanks for taking the time. I've had so many great dynamic writers on my show, so I feel real blessed. And I've spoken to El Nash a couple times. I have local Pacific Northwest writers, like with an energy and like a verve that, talking about writing, being excited about talking about writing, talking philosophy, talking change, which you do. But before we drop fully into the writing, I don't know, I get kind of excited when somebody starts a new podcast. I was excited to see that you had, it's called Things Change. And just out of curiosity, what it's been like for you starting the podcast, having these conversations with great authors.
Yeah, it was basically, to be honest, a quite kind of selfish thing, because when I was writing my book, Things That Are Different Now, I was obviously thinking a lot about change because the book is about change. And while I was writing it, I genuinely was like, how do other people deal with this? And specifically also other writers, other artists. And it was sort of like my way to talk to people that I admire and ask them all the questions that, I've been asking myself or when I was reading their work, So it's been really great. I basically wrapped up the first season, which is a very short season. I only do 6 episodes, I decided. But I'm already planning the second season. And I don't know, it's been really interesting some of the people I knew before, like Al Nash, for instance, is a good friend of mine. And I feel like it was just interesting to have this sort of 1 hour and talk to someone specifically about change, transformation, and how they go through this process, because I feel like change is the only constant. We're constantly going through some sort of change. And I think the better you know how to embrace it and to kind of flip it for you, like make something productive for you, the easier it will feel. And I think that's also kind of what flow maybe is, to be in a flow state is to accept change, is to accept the fact that you cannot be static, you need to be in movement. And
Did you
really
start
good.
the exploration, not to jump in, but did you start the exploration because like you were struggling with change or like anxiety or being like trying to figure out a way, okay, this is happening, just like, did that stem your curiosity of being like, because I know sometimes with change is like, I feel like I'm doing pretty good, and other times it's like, oh shit, like this is all fucking jacked up, like no change, I want everything the same here. Like, was it therapy for you?
No, I totally hear you. And I think so the reason why I wrote the book, or the reason why I felt so compelled, is that I'm known to change a lot of things. I think that I embrace change a lot. Like I used to have a different hair color like every other week, so to speak. And I moved so many times. I moved abroad. So I'm not afraid of change, but I realized, and that kind of came out of, so the book that is going to come out, Things That Are Different Now, it's the last one of a trilogy. So I wrote 2 other books before that. And when I wrote the second book, Things I Have Loved, which is heavily about relationships, but also about family, specifically my relationship to my father. And I realized actually while I was writing it, kind of finishing it, that there was something, a pattern I had never actually looked at. And that was the relationship to my mother. So the third book is actually a lot about this relationship and the blind spot that I kind of carry throughout my life. And I believe that we cannot ever truly change if we cannot see the blind spots around us, which obviously is an endeavor that is impossible because there will always be blind spots. But in the specific case, I finally could see it. I could see it. I could see the blind spot, and I could see it shifting. And I think that was what intrigued me about the change at that specific point in time, to kind of illustrate how the reason why it's so hard to change is because everyone around us can see what's wrong with us. That's a quote from Mad Men. There's a scene.
Thank you for that quote.
You know, like everyone sees what's wrong with us, but we cannot. And that's why it's so hard to change. And I'm fully aware that I still have lots of blind spots, and that's also something I write about. But I think it was sort of like an attempt to get closer to the blind spots, to get closer to my personal patterning, I guess in the hope to maybe reveal some blind spots to others, you know, to maybe create the change that they need in their life, to get unstuck. Because I think that's the thing, like, you want the change, then you get it, then you don't want it. And it's this like back and forth.
I am like, I'm just fascinated by your investigation into it. And of course, like, it's totally like philosophy and art turf, you know, as a writer, right? Like, you know, is their ideal kind of concept of things, and like within constant change, how, like, where's the identity, right? Like, where are you? I've had a couple of authors on recently who talked about the concept of home, like very specifically, and I just like felt like, um, and those authors, Megan Lamb and Craig Randall, both talking about home. And like when I was looking at your writing, thinking about what you brings out, it's like it comes up a lot in writing, like where's home, or like change and comfort with change. You had a quote. I hope it's your quote. Goodness, I can feel the longing of a future self waiting patiently to take me to the other side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that's my quote.
Yeah, I wrote it down. There's a tribute. It must be Sophie's. But just that energy towards, like, that excitement towards, in that unknown, all philosophy stuff. Since we're talking philosophy, here we go. What is art?
What is art?
What is art?
That's such a good question, because I recently learned how to weave. I was in Mexico for 5 weeks and I did an artist residency there. And we actually talked a lot about how certain things are considered art and other things are considered craft. And weaving, for instance, is considered generally as craft. And the only, like, when does it cross over to art? And I think, I mean, maybe not to get totally into the whole capitalism, Western society thing, but I think that has something to do with that obviously if you, let's just go with an example. If I now learn how to weave and then I create an exhibition and I hang up 3 wall hangings on a white cube, like have this sort of like environment, it will probably be considered art. If you would go to the market and buy something for maybe, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 pounds, whatever, by a master weaver, you'd consider that a product or like a thing to use, whatever it is. Like that wall hanging would be a different thing. It would be decoration or,
I'm fascinated by that. Like, is there an institutional anointing, or by pulling that out of the context to say, you're supposed to look at this in this way as art, as opposed to strict commerce? I love, because there's some sort of magical or like weird twist in there that happens in my head.
Yeah. And I think it ties, like what it roots down to is that we learn to like separate beauty and sort of necessity or utility, that we don't, and which I think is a big problem, because that's why things are so ugly these days, because there's sort of we're not used to creating beautiful things just for the sake of it, like just making something beautiful. It has to be either elevated as art or it's craft, or it's just sort of this other thing. And I feel like that's very sad, because to me art is actually just expressing yourself. Like, maybe to give a definition, it's expressing yourself, letting the world connect with you and be in connection with the world, and creating something out of that. And that to me is art. And is it good art? That we could argue, that's sort of that's another question.
I really enjoy that. And everybody, just to recap and mention Sophia Hembeck's work again, the newsletter, the newsletter on Substack, Things Change podcast, first book in the trilogy, Things I Have Noticed, second, Things I Have Loved, third, Things That Are Different Now. And you talked about that. I saw it published May 2025. I wanted to catch up. Is it out? Coming out soon?
Yeah, it's coming out next week.
Oh my goodness.
15th of May. I'm very excited because...
Congratulations.
It's the end of the trilogy. It's such a weird thing to kind of... I mean, the whole thing happened in a way completely unplanned. Like, I never planned to write a trilogy. I never actually even planned to necessarily self-publish in the way that I'm doing this. So it's been quite an interesting path to be on, because, I mean, it all started with me having severe depression during lockdown and just starting this newsletter, that started in May 2020. So like literally 5 years ago. And then out of this and kind of gaining a readership, I thought, oh, why not write a longer essay and create a zine? And I was doing these cyanotypes at the same time, like kind of mix it with my artwork. And then this Kickstarter, this crowdfunding campaign sort of felt reasonable to, fund the printing. And then it grew into a book. And that literally happened in this fever dream of 2 months where I was just writing. And basically from a 40, initially it was supposed to be like 40 pages zine style. And then it just grew into like 140 pages into this essay collection. And I was reaching a lot of people, and I was collaborating with indie bookstores, and I think it was really, and then I also decided I'm going to basically found my own publishing company. Like, it was really not planned. And also the second book wasn't, so I didn't know it was going to be a trilogy. And basically 3 years later, I went through this terrible breakup. I didn't have, well, I basically had to move out and didn't have a home for 2 months. I'm not going to say I was homeless because I had friends and everything, but I didn't have an address. Let's just say it like that.
Precarious, you know?
Yeah. And so I went on the Camino de Santiago, which is this like pilgrimage path in Spain.
I'm so
which
familiar.
is,
I'm fascinated. I just want to, I get excited sometimes. I've long been fascinated with that pilgrimage. I haven't
oh,
done it, but I have people close to me have done it multiple times.
yeah.
The road Santiago de Compostela.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go on.
Oh, you have to do it. It's
Oh,
honestly, it was one of the most magical experiences of my life. And basically what happened is I was one day in Bilbao and it was raining and I was just kind of looking for shelter, and I ended up in this beautiful old library in Bilbao, and they have this reading room, and I just sat down and I was just kind of journaling in my notebook, and I suddenly just had this idea and wrote down the title, Things I Have Loved. And I just realized in that moment, I will write the second book. I will write another book and it will be a trilogy. And in that moment, I also already had the idea to write about change after the second one. So it really kind of was this intuitive process. I guess this is how I usually do things. I feel something, I have an idea, or somebody tells me something and I'm inspired, and then I just kind of just go for it. Yeah.
Why'd you do the pilgrimage? Like deep down, like what was like the reason?
Kind of like you, I've always been drawn to this pilgrimage. I've had a couple of friends who've done it. I had a friend who, I think she was sort of like the person who inspired me the most, because she said to me, honestly, Sophia, you can just do it. You don't have to worry. This is so like, because it's not like wilderness survival. Like it's that's not the kind of hike that you're on. It's just it's very you don't need to plan a lot. You need to have some good hiking boots and obviously some clothes with you. But technically, you could probably like organize the trip in like a week and just go, because it's very well like you literally just follow a path of seashells. Like there's signs everywhere. Like you cannot miss it. You wouldn't even need a map. And there's also so many other people who are also going at the same time. So you're not even really alone. Like there's stretches where it's just you and the forest or the mountains. But you see someone walking by probably at worst every 3 hours and at best every 10 minutes. So it's not like you're not isolated. And then there's these beautiful hostels that are that basically volunteers run it, and you don't need a lot of money because it's all donation based. So if you don't have a lot, €5 is fine. Or if you don't have any money, it's fine too, but you should donate if you can. And it's just really, it's a magical trip. And there's this thing that everyone says, like, buen camino. And it's this idea that also the path will provide. And there were some moments where I was like, I'm going to quit. I'm done. This is terrible. And then I just trusted that the path will provide, and it did. So I don't know. It's, yeah.
Makes me think about a million things. Thanks for sharing. The I grew up Catholic, so I understand every aspect of why that's there, and the pilgrimage, and the enduring. and the path and the stations and the rest and the church at the end. I'm agnostic, but like there's parts of my personality where it's just intuitively understand the why, which would be difficult to explain. So I'm really drawn to it. In the gorgeous chapel at the end. What did you feel when you got to the end?
Well, I didn't actually. So I did it for
That's
3
okay.
weeks,
And it,
but I kind of decided that I chose a section along the coast. So I went basically from the border of France to Santander, which is sort of like in the middle. So I would have needed 6 weeks to do the whole path to arrive in Santiago. But it's interesting because like once you're on it, you also realize that it doesn't really matter whether you arrive in Santiago. Like it's the end is not the, that's not the goal. Is not to arrive. The goal is the journey and to meet people and to have these conversations. And I definitely will go back though. And I think maybe that's also why I did it this way, because I felt like I wanted to have something to come back to. And
heck yeah. I understand. I do that with I read the best book series in the entire universe, like every 9 volumes, 15 volumes, whatever. And I'll leave that last one or two being like, no, I'm not going to finish ever. He tries to people around nuts.
Yeah.
How can you not know that? I'm like, I don't want to know that. I'll read it in 5 years. Now I'm getting older. I make different existential choices of being like, shit, I better read it.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Not necessarily knowing that, right? No, thanks. Wow, thanks for chatting about that. I used to work in an independent travel and language bookstore outside of Washington D.C. And I remember I'd never even heard of Santiago Compostela, the Camino, the walk, the path, and they had a guidebook and a map. So like the store was slow. Like I get the map home. I'm like, holy shit, what is this thing? I had never heard of it. It's a Catholic from the East Coast of the U.S. I didn't know anything about Santiago. But anyways, that was the coolest thing. And I'm like looking at this map. I'm like, holy shit, people do this? Because I'm thinking more Muslim tradition in Islam of the pilgrimage. It's not my first intuitive thing growing up as a Catholic. It's like, where's the pilgrimage? Because it's far away, But all right, there's other philosophy questions we got. What's the role of art then? I loved your response and thinking about arts and crafts and why things here or there. But like, what's the role? And is the role different nowadays, 2025, is chatting here than it's been?
I mean, I feel like art has many purposes and reasons why it's there for us. I think to me personally, the role that art plays in my life is about connection and to be connected with others and to, we're kind of born into this world and, all kinds of things happen to you. And I think to me it was always important to kind of make meaning of, this so-called life situation we're in, and like trying to figure out like why and like, and I feel like art is a way to connect and to ask these questions and to feel that you're not alone, that you're not alone in the world. I think that as an artist, we have definitely some responsibility to, I think the responsibility we have for ourselves is to create things that we actually truly want to create, and not because there's some sort of gain or some, maybe you'll make more money if you do this or you'll get more appreciation if you bend it a certain way. And I think also that never really works out. I think that's sort of like a false dream or false hope that, that you could actually ever really bend anything without, losing yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the simple answer would be the role of art to me is connection. Yeah.
When did you do visual art? You mentioned some of the other visual components you do. You're a writer. Think a lot about writing. For you, on the artist piece, did you see yourself at a particular moment as artist, writer, like in terms of identity?
I think so. I'm one of those writers I've always been a writer. Like I've written since I was a child. It was very imaginative, sometimes to my detriment in terms of nightmares and things like that. Like I was also a very scared child in a way, very afraid of my imagination sometimes. And I guess still to this day, I'm not a fan of horror movies and stuff like that. But
what's your conversation with El Nash then? The horror. I'm sorry.
We did actually talk about the Blair Witch Project. The thing is, I'm also drawn to horror and facing my fear. So it's not an aversion. It's more like a deep respect for it. I mean, I totally see, for instance, that The Shining is an incredible work of art. Like, to me, that's one of the best horror movies. I think it's more that it does actually really haunt me when something's truly terrifying or scary. So I need to be a little bit careful with that. But to get back to your question,
jump in there right there. You brought up horror, and then I was like, wait a second. I wonder what those conversations are like. But I didn't mean to jump in there about that. But yeah, thanks for the indulgence. I heard horror. Nothing can continue until I disagree quite quickly. But go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, so I think there was definitely a moment where I professionally decided I'm a writer now. Like, I'm going to take this seriously. And that was basically, I was studying theatre and media studies, which was sort of like a compromise to, I guess, study something that is some sort of science. It obviously isn't. It's still a liberal arts degree. But in my head, that was sort of
let's call it a science, what we need to call it a science. Let's keep
exactly. It was like the compromise between going to art school or like going to do like a creative writing degree, and I don't know. I mean, you're so young when you make these decisions. Like I was 19 when I decided that. So, but when I was actually 21, I did like a semester abroad in Vienna, and I was writing this play, and I was also an assistant, like a directing assistant at the theater there. And I just realized I had this conversation with a friend, and I was like, I need to take this seriously now and really choose this life, or I don't know, like I need to fully go for it. I need to fully commit. There's no wishy-washy in between for me, because I just don't want to do anything else. So that was sort of, a really sort of, that was a moment for me. And ever since then, I kind of just made every decision based on that whatever I want to do, art and writing comes first and is the thing that it's so tied to my identity now that I guess that's probably what most artists or creative people, like, it's not a job. It's your life. It's like who you are and how you do anything really is as a writer, as an artist. It's nothing that you don't clock off. Like there's nothing, you're always on the clock. There is no clock. You're just
I
there.
love that point. It's like I've thought about it a lot because, like, my day job, which is day night job, is a union rep, union organizer out here in Oregon. But as I've developed my own like art, like in sense of creating art, like photography, painting, and with the podcast, for me, it's been like an organizing like thing in my head, like connecting people, like which is what art is. Like the energy behind art is like this person does this, that person does that. Holy shit, that person expert on that, and it's the way my brain works, so it continues to work in that way, and it's been crucial for like my health. So it's been a nice thing to find for me, like of a way of being. But you've particularly with writing, you felt that the entire time. Just out of curiosity, you write in German as well, or predominantly.
I only write in English these days. Basically, it kind of happened slowly and then all at once in a way. So when I moved here 6 years ago, I joined this writing group and I was working on a novel that I guess I have abandoned now, but it's been this long project.
Doesn't sound like quite.
Everyone has this like decade-long novel.
I gave up on you. I cast you away.
It's one day, well, probably not. Anyway, so I joined this writing group and I had to translate it for them to, be able to read it. So that's kind of how it started. And then I realized I actually really enjoy writing in English. And obviously when you are surrounded by one language all the time and that's what you speak every day and you start to think in English, it just really made sense for me. And obviously a third thing is that writing in English exposes me to a larger, wider audience and it's more accessible to write in English. And as I'm writing essays, which are kind of niche as like a genre, it was also, it just made sense in so many ways to kind of, write in English. But I miss German, to be fair. I think it's a beautiful language. I think there's a reason why I feel like particularly Americans are quite obsessed with all these words that we have that, that you don't have.
I am.
So I'm starting to, I actually started to translate other people's work, like German essayists. It's been like a little passion project of mine that I started this year because I feel like there's so many beautiful essays out there that, English speakers or only English speakers, they can't access. And that's such a shame.
I don't know, they have capacity at present, to do the translations. But I always noticed it particularly when I was in academia, where like if you were interested in a thinker or like a movement, then like you could have like really incredible thinkers like of a generation in the country, like get into that whole thing. But you might never read it. And it's like this philosophical idea. It's like, not that they figured out everything in philosophy, but it's like, that exists. And I don't know what they're saying. I know they're saying something.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of life, right? That there's always books and things that you just will never be exposed to, and that you kind of have to be okay with the fact that there's so many things you won't be able to try and to experience. And
I thought of the book Obsessed. I encounter that everywhere and feel it like
the book of what?
The idea of like not getting to like what's there, or the book that you haven't gotten to. It's like a haunting, like romantic book obsessed thought.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Things Change podcast. Things are listed in all your books. This is the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. Like, we have to be talking about things and we have to talk about the titular. Like, we should be eminently qualified, you and I, Sophia, to like it, or at least approach. Why is there something rather than nothing?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what your relationship to the word thing is, but to me, it's making something tangible that's not tangible, like, or that it's everything can be a thing in a way, it's like a very vague way of describing something. And yeah, I don't know, something rather than nothing. How do you feel about that?
Well, when you ask the question at the end, what is the nothing, right? I always think this question, there's two problems with the question, and I admit it, even though it's the titular and biggest issue. One is exactly what you point out, what is nothing, right? And the other bit is some folks said, how is it that there is something? Because there's an evidence that there is something. My own personal approach is that, like, I do look at nothing in a different way from a Buddhist perspective, like that there's no thing there. Like, when you're talking about the constancy, if that's the right word, of like a change, right? Like, for me, in looking at what you write about, it's like that deep question of like, is it all just that flow? And how do you say something is there? Buddhists say is like, I'm pointing out there and it's a tree, but that's just me picking out a word to materialize something that's just a phenomena. So the nothing, the way I think about it, is more emptiness. It has like content to it, but it just lacks inherent existence. In the Western bit, nothing is like the thought of nihilism, right? It's like you and I are talking. There's a self-evidentiary piece, I think, maybe for us, like we experience something and not the absence. So it's a clumsy question. I always ask it clumsy, but the way I make sense of it for me is that the nothing is more like an emptiness of inherent existence. And things are phenomena in the words. And this is where the writers come in, like you. Like, how do we use words to give body to like why that relationship was so shitty, or like why that political protest happened? I don't know. I hope I'm making sense on my side.
I think I get what you mean, specifically with the like no thing, and there's a word that I felt really drawn to in my second book, which is called the lacuna. And like a lacuna is sort of, it's an empty space where something used to be. And I was kind of obsessed with this idea that the lacuna tells you that there was something, but it's not there any longer. But you can still feel its absence. And I think it's just an interesting concept to think about, that you can feel, I guess that you can feel something rather than nothing. You can feel the lacuna. You can feel
it's like traces. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's something like that.
But it is definitely not there. And for instance, then in the third book, writing about the blind spot is like, you're not even aware that it's like, that is not even in your, cannot touch a blind spot. It's like trying to catch your shadow. Like, it's not possible. Like, you just can't. So yeah.
I love that word. I haven't heard it in a bit, but I remember encountering it and trying to find like the meaning within it. And I like the ambiguity in such ideas. Like there's resonances. You think like ghosts or echoes or like palimpsest or like markers that point to something, sort of, or at one point they did. Man, that's a good word.
Yeah, I really love it. It also sounds pretty great. So
it does.
Yeah.
It does. Well, hey, we get to indulge ourselves with words on the podcast and talking writing. Visual arts.
Yeah.
I saw some of the things you did, and looking at even in folks listeners back behind Sophia's Pink Moon visual print, which is really beautiful. And I always, when folks are great writers and they dig into and get into writing, what's it like for you on the visual arts or painting or that creation? And what's the experience for you? Like, does it feel more complete, or is it just like a different voice completely? That type of stuff.
I mean, I feel like I've always felt also drawn to art. Like I actually applied to go to art school in my early 20s, and I was painting a lot of sort of like portraits and very colorful, like figurative paintings. Didn't get in, probably for the better, because I feel like I really like I'm enjoying myself as a writer more in the sense that I feel like art is so joyful to me. It's kind of nice that it's not like it is maybe even probably my purest expression, because it usually, like, it doesn't have to do anything necessarily. I mean, I sell these prints now, but they're more, I usually create things that I just want on my wall. As you can see, that it's like I just create things that I would love to have in my environment, which is also how I started this weaving class, because I just felt really compelled to create these like textiles. And I don't know, I feel like, to me, the way I create my visual art is very much through their means to create beauty for me, and not purely decorative. There's always, they're usually tied to my writing. So, for instance, the Pink Moon, there's actually a reference in the book about the pink moon and the song by Nick Drake, Pink Moon, and without spoiling too much, but there's a reason why I created these prints in connection to my book. And like my first book, I created these cyanotypes, which cyanotypes are also called, or they were used as blueprints. Like that's literally where the word blueprint is coming from.
Okay.
Because they were a way, it's an old photographic process, and they were used back in the day to create blueprints and create copies, basically, but also of plans and other stuff. But anyway, it made sense to me to use this technique as well, because the first book, in a way, is the blueprint of my life. So I kind of like to connect the words with the art. So I feel like it's all very, it has to be organic, it has to kind of grow from something that I'm doing. I really kind of actually struggled, because I had set up the first book as blue. So the whole book is printed in blue with blue ink. And the second one is printed in red and has these like red vignettes, photographs. And then the third one is green. And I struggled a lot with what kind of green artwork I would do. And for a long time, I thought I was going to do collage because it made kind of sense with the way that I was writing the book, which is very kind of like a text collage, almost like but also maybe like a tapestry. But I realized, which is actually how I got into weaving, but that's another story. But anyway, then I finally landed on the pink moon because, as I said, it made sense with some reference in the book. But it was really hard because I gave myself a task and I was like, now I don't know how to finish it so that it fits. Yeah, but it's really important to me that it fits, that it makes sense.
I was when you mentioned weaving. I remember when I was younger, I was just taught really basic components of how to weave, and for me, it was like breathing. There's something about the repetition and
Yeah.
how you pulled it together. For me, that I didn't know. It was like 11. It was like fucking early therapy, like early repetition and rhythm for me. And so it was good to hear you talk about your time there, Mexico and working with that. For me, it was just the mechanics of it. Like, I obviously loved the little thing that I made. Mom and Papa were proud and stuff. But it was just, I want my hands to move this way. And if it makes sense, that's awesome too.
I mean, it's very much about rhythm and patterns. I mean, patterns on the textile itself, but the repetition, the pattern. I mean, there's a reason why textiles, the word textile comes from text, like text or a means to weave in Latin. Like it's so connected. The world of weaving and the world of writing. Like you weave stories, like there's this
pulling it together. It's pulling together for me. Like there's a component I initially thought of. I grew up in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, which is like the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, U.S. 1780 something. I was taught in elementary school, but that was just fueling the weavers and the what would you call it, the water power fueling the mill right there in 18th century. And so like where I grew up, Rhode Island is such a textiles manufacturing like massive hub, for an amount in history. So there was even a carryover why I would be in a city school and be a male in the 80s and learning some basic components of weaving. I think was tied to the history, but it's like, I don't know, I find that stuff so fascinating. When you're talking about the stories too, obviously, it's something that's been referred to before, but there's a truth of like this integration. I'm going to start weaving like wild now. That's what happened with this interview.
Honestly, I think it's really meditative. Like it kind of, you get really into your own rhythm and your own thoughts. And I also think any sort of art that you do, any sort of thing that you create with your hands, it's always very grounding and I think actually fairly, like, I think especially weaving, I think it's actually, it was hard, but you can learn pretty fast. Like,
yeah,
it's not like drawing. I think some things are way more difficult to.
I took the weaving pretty quickly. Oh, it's so wonderful to talk about weaving. Sophie, you gotta be deliberate and let listeners know where to find your books. I know you're over there in Scotland, but a lot of people read your Substack. Like, how do folks find things? Find things.
Yeah, so I think to buy the books, the best way is to just go on newsletterpublishing.com. then you literally buy it from me, the distributor, which is always the best thing to do. If you are in the US, which I guess probably most of your listeners are, the ebook is also online. You can find it, and yeah. Otherwise, I'm very often on Instagram, even though I try to not be. Just my name, Sophia Hembeck, and yeah, the Things Change podcast is available anywhere you can get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I don't know where else you get the podcast, but it will be there. And yeah, Substack, the newsletter.substack.com.
Any teasers? Not that there has to be for season 2 or what you're focusing in on the podcast or podcast.
I think for season 2, I already have some guests secured, and I mean, currently, because my book is coming out next week, I'm like totally like, I have a book tour. I'll be going to Berlin next week. I'll be in Dublin. I'll be in Vienna. I'll be in London. So for the next 2 months, I'm pretty focused on that.
Heck.
But the season 2, I hope I'll be recording in June, and then it'll come out maybe end of June, August. That's the plan for now.
It's great to hear. Congratulations on all this too, and good luck on the tour. And a lot of folks listen to Something Rather Than Nothing podcast. Yeah, primarily U.S. and even Pacific Northwest audience, but a bunch of folks in Scotland listen, in Australia. I have a decent amount of German listeners. I found a podcast where I believe that was in German. I didn't have the capacity to understand your thoughts there when I was starting to listen to it, but lots of places to find you, and it's been really great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been really. I feel very. I'm still going to think about a couple of things, I think, after this.
Yeah, and that's what's fun about even just that damn word, lacuna. Is it lacuna?
The lacuna, yeah.
The lacuna. And I've seen other writers fixate on that word, not like overusing it, but just being like, what is this word? And it's like one of those that writers really dig in. So awesome to chat with you. Good luck on the things on the podcast. Good job having a plan of like X amount of episodes. I'm trying to end versions of Something Rather Than Nothing podcast heading towards 300. I'm going to be like, I want to do the first season of 300 episodes and maybe 6. The second one, I don't know what to do. So good job on your side to have a good plan to go forward.
Thank you. Well, this has been really great.
Yeah. One, and this is an indulgence on my part, okay? And pardon up front, but whenever I hear Berlin, I adore painting, and I adore painting in general. Okay. And 1920s Berlin painters and Die Bruch, and I've read so many books about the culture and all these things, and I don't want to romanticize it, but what's just for you? What's Berlin like as an art city? Me and this out here in America, out in the woods in Oregon. What's like Berlin like as an art city?
I mean, it is interesting because I kind of famously wrote about leaving Berlin in my first book, Things I've Noticed. And I lived in Berlin for 5 years. I studied playwriting there. And I mean, in a way, Berlin has taught me so much. But at the same time, I personally, as an artist nowadays, I just couldn't handle Berlin any longer. I think Berlin has there is a certain sense of brokenness, and it's a very hectic and sort of like people. I think what you kind of move there. Like when I moved there, I had like blonde hair, colorful clothes. 2 years later, I had a micro fringe, blue hair, and was only wearing black. And so it changes you. And I feel like it's a beautiful place for a while. But, you know, like Joan Didion says, you can stay too long at the fair. And it's sort of, I guess that's how I feel about Berlin as a fair that I love to visit every once in a while, but not as a place to live any longer. I think I live in Edinburgh now, and I feel like that's the exact vibe or energy that I need to kind of thrive, which is a bit more community driven and a bit more cozy and friendly.
Oh, wow. Hey, it's not an indulgence to ask for. Thank you so much for chatting about Berlin at the end. Anybody really check out Sophia Hembeck's writing, visual art, and the places that we mentioned. And I really appreciate your time and being able to kick around some philosophy and art with you. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This was, I really liked it. And thank you.
Awesome.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind-the-scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.